Why do you support Trump?
So I would say my number one reason is because foreign policy with relations to being the lowest war option available.
Have I talked to you before?
No, but we met at Jubilee one time, but I've never been on one of your streams.
Oh, damn. Damn. Maybe that was where I remembered your voice from or something. What Jubilee were we on?
We cooked Jordan Peterson together.
Oh, okay. That's cool. That's cool. Okay. Okay. So yeah. So what was the reason why you support Trump again? You
So
said
it would
foreign
be foreign
policy.
policy, the lowest war candidate. Yeah.
Lowest war candidate. Okay. All right. Sure. Let's talk about that. Is that the only set of reasons as to why, or is that like the main?
I would honestly, that's my war is my number one. I have a couple other subsidiary issues, but I think war is probably the biggest one for me.
Okay. All right. And so like, could you give me any like specifics on that? Like, do you think that he's less likely to cause wars, or what is it about war in
Yeah,
specific?
I think under Trump, twofold. I think one, he's not likely to like cause a war where we're going to get involved, and two, I think his perceived image as a, I mean, for lack of a better word, crazy strongman actually deters other countries from doing warlike efforts.
How is that done with Putin?
Well, I mean, didn't Putin go into Ukraine under Biden, not under Trump?
Well, that's not the claim I'm making. Claim I'm making is specifically that Trump, since he got in office, he lowered the funding with Ukraine, and they've gotten more power in Ukraine, particularly because of Donald Trump's position on the matter. So the idea of the crazy strongman deterring violence when it relates to Russia and Ukraine clearly didn't happen like he claimed it would.
Well, he didn't go into Ukraine under Trump. He went in under Biden. We then supported Ukraine through a proxy of like funding them with weapons and stuff, and Trump is withdrawing from that. I think that actually is probably the more viable path to peace, though. If what you want is peace, Ukraine's not going to defeat Russia. I don't think sending endless money and weapons to them so that they can keep throwing bodies into this war, I don't think that's a viable long-term strategy.
Then why is Trump doing it again?
Why is he sending? I thought you just said he was sending less money.
Yeah, he cut the funding and then he brought it back. So why did he bring it back if it is the case that he was going to cut them off to give them to Russia?
When did he bring it back? Was that in the new big beautiful bill thing that he passed?
I'd have to check back.
Because I was not aware he increased the funding.
Yeah, he did. I can send you if you'd like.
I mean, I'll try. If you look it up and you're looking at it, I'll trust you. But I just don't recall it happening.
July.
Okay.
July. Trump sends weapons to Ukraine by the numbers. It's from CSIS.
Okay. Yeah. Then ultimately, I mean, I would support a withdrawal from the Ukraine situation. Admittedly, he inherited a pretty bad mess, right? Because we were already involved in sending. And a lot of the times it's really like a lesser of the two evils option of Biden is going to send weapons or Kamala would send weapons either way, right? So I guess I would look at the Iran strike, which I think was handled relatively well, or as well as you could hope for in that situation, where he eliminates Iran's nuclear facilities, but no one either way, we don't get attacked back, etc.
I don't think he did. I think he set them only back like a few months, according to U.S. intelligence reports, in terms of the Iran strike, and then he increased the likelihood of conflict in the long run. Long run. Plus, I think he was the reason why this happened in the first place by pulling out of the nuclear agreement that was established. And then in terms of sending weapons, you said like lesser of two evils, so like providing less weapons. Is that kind of like your view on the matter? You want less weapons to be
Well,
given?
yeah, I think under Trump it's more likely the Ukraine conflict will end than under Biden or Kamala.
But by end, do you mean like Russia takes over Ukraine? Like, what do you mean by end?
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I really don't see an end other than Russia takes over Ukraine. Do you think there's a scenario where Russia just shrugs and goes home and says, "I guess we lost"?
Yeah, I actually genuinely do. I think that the West would be able to uphold Ukraine's ability to defend themselves against Russia to enough of a degree that like Russia wouldn't have been able to economically like maintain that in the long run. So it would have forced them into a condition where they couldn't take over the rest of Ukraine, or at least had to come to some type of table of negotiation. Otherwise, I don't think that you actually have this crazy strongman deterrence. Like that doesn't happen. You have to actually have some actual true deterrence to be able to bring them to the table, because otherwise they're not going to come to the table unless they're the one taking it. Does it make sense? Like, I don't want them to take the table. I want them to be prevented from doing so. We have the Budapest Memorandum. If we didn't hold the Budapest Memorandum, how can any agreements be trusted around the world, given that we can't uphold ours?
Well, I mean, ultimately, I think the strongman deterrence doesn't apply as much to large powers like Russia and China, more to smaller powers like the Iran situation. I think the Russia situation, we're in a relatively bad place because we're not willing to escalate further, right? I don't foresee any president doing boots on the ground, right? Do you?
Oh, no, 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 no. Like, the only way there would be, like, boots on the ground is if there is already peace and then they join NATO in order to, like, ensure that they have
Right.
sovereignty. because that would be their essentially only insurance of sovereignty. Because they've
Right,
seen
but
that like.
obviously we couldn't.
Go ahead.
I was just, we couldn't let them into NATO now, right? Obviously, we agree it's too late at this point in time. We would need there not to be a war before we let them in.
There would need to be some type of bringing them to the table. But the issue is that Trump put us into a position where it is the case that Russia has more power and they have less of a reason to come to the table. That's why we saw them not come to any type of agreement or negotiation that actually was meaningful.
Well, that, and I also think Russia's counting on our fatigue of not wanting to continue to send weapons to Ukraine, right?
Wait, there you go. You just proved my point that Putin is depending on you, is depending on Trump in order to be able to take right Ukraine. You just proved my point.
No, I agree with you. It's a battle of attrition. What's going to wane first, right? Russia's willing to fight or are willing to send troops. It's like a reverse Vietnam situation, right?
Okay,
And
but
obviously we lost our Vietnam.
go ahead.
We lost our Vietnam. I don't know that the Russians will lose theirs because during our I analogize this war to Vietnam in that we had massive protests at home. We had a huge pushback. I don't think Russia is seeing the level of protesting at home that we saw during Vietnam. So I don't think they're anywhere near done fighting. I think they've got several more years of the fight left in them, even if we were to keep sending weapons to Ukraine. How long do you think they would last if we kept sending? Do you think a few years is reasonable?
I don't think I can make that type of determination, right? I don't think I know. I don't think either of us would be able to know. I think that we're kind of just whipping that out of our ass, like being like it's going to be a few years. So like I don't really feel comfortable making that type of determination. But what I do feel comfortable with is saying that we would have a greater likelihood of forcing Russia into submission if it is the case that we didn't have Trump in office, because Putin was relying on Republicans getting in office, and that makes him hold out for longer. If it is the case that he didn't, right, then he wouldn't have held out for as long, or it would have been more likely that he would have been turned away.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably truth to that. I guess I don't value the quote, like what you said, forcing Russia into submission. I don't value that at the current cost, which is a combination of large amounts of US dollars and large amounts of Ukrainian lives. I think that is probably a not good trade from just an American perspective.
So are you trying to act like you have like a more pro-Ukraine position when they want to defend themselves still? Like, is it more pro-Ukraine to like say that? I mean, also, you can't limit Russia from as many people as they want to if they have full control over the region.
Well, I don't think they want to just arbitrarily Ukrainians. I think they want to conquer Ukraine, right? So I
Why are
think
they
when you ask
committing
me
war
if I'm
crimes?
pro-Ukraine,
Why are they killing citizens?
well, because there's a war, right? Like I think occupation is different than war, right? People die in war. Occupation doesn't necessarily work the same way. So when you ask me if I'm more pro-Ukraine, I'm not more pro-Ukraine the government, but I do feel that I'm pro-Ukraine the people. So the government of Ukraine obviously would no longer exist if Russia occupied them, but it's not the case that like when a country conquers another one, all the people in there just immediately, right? That's not like the Mongol invasion happening.
Yeah, I'm not saying that that's like 100% for sure, but we can't have any type of assurances, right, on anything that could happen to Ukrainians. Ukrainians could, be undergoing like incredibly like huge human rights violations, right? They could lose vast human rights. So that's another thing that we have to take into account, is that Russia has full exclusive control over the region. Also, I mean, we've literally been able to provide a defense for other situations in Europe. I guess I have a question here. Would you want to be involved in NATO?
I would be willing to maintain involvement in NATO if I felt the other European countries were paying more of their fair share. So I agree with Trump's general NATO policy of somewhat blustering a threat that we leave NATO in order to try to coerce our allies into contributing more and building up their own military. Because I just think we're doing too much work.
What is a fair share?
I mean, truthfully, I think that you should contribute what you get out, or at least proportionately. So I think Europe benefits far more from NATO than the United States does, and United States pays way more proportionately than Europe. We should probably reverse that, or at the very least equalize it. Like the entirety of Europe should be contributing at least as much as the United States.
EU as much as US. Okay. Okay, so you're still willing to stay involved in it, though. Okay, so then here's my question.
I'm open to it, but I'm not married to it, yeah.
Okay, but then here's my question. What's the point of staying in NATO? Like, the same types of reasons I would say that you are wanting to stay in Ukraine to be able to defend Ukraine would be the same very reasons we're in NATO, right?
Not exactly, because I think the Western European countries that were within NATO are very valued trading partners, and so if one of them were to fall, it would hurt us far more economically than if Ukraine fell.
Hurt us economically, but couldn't we then get benefits from engaging in more trade with Ukraine? And also, like, how do you measure that? How do you measure that Ukraine is going to be less or more important in terms of trading partner comparative to others? Like,
What
what are you
can
basing it on? What
measure how
type
much
of
trade we
trading?
do
Like,
with
is
a
it
country?
GDP? How much they're trading, or how much they're importing or
Well, I
exporting?
don't
Or
not GDP specifically, right? Because GDP is just how much stuff they make. I would just
yeah.
look at our trade amounts, like how many in U.S. dollars measure how much we're trading with Ukraine compared to how much we trade with Germany.
Wait, any country in NATO, because if Ukraine's trading with the United States is more than any country in NATO, then you would have to see that there's a better reason for Ukraine to be in NATO than there would be for any of those other countries. Then
No, that's a fair point. So I guess you would also need to weigh not just how much does the country trade with us or benefit us in some way, but you also have to offset that by how much of a liability do they create, right? I think Portugal creates very low liabilities for us as a country, whereas if we were to try to let Ukraine in or any other Eastern European bloc or Taiwan or anything like that, they create more of a liability if we were to somehow let them in NATO because although they may trade more, they also cost more.
but why do they cost more? Is it because they're at a threat of being invaded? Because they wouldn't be if they're in
Correct.
NATO.
Well, but
Like
that's not necessarily true, right?
do you think Finland shouldn't have been able to join NATO?
I think it would depend on how likely are the Russians to invade Finland, right? Do they want to do a continuation war from the
It was
1940s,
pretty
or are
high.
they
That's
kind of
why they
over it?
joined. That's why they joined. It was pretty high.
I agree, and they also, but I mean, really, it's NATO joining is just like any other market transaction. You have to look at market power at the time. Didn't Finland join when they had better leverage to join, right? Like when we were more afraid of the Soviets. I don't view Russia as much of a
Finland
threat
joined in
now as they
2023.
were in, say,
Finland joined in
oh, did they
2023.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, if you think Russia was going to invade Finland and they joined in 23, I think that's probably a mistake on our part. But that would have been
Really?
Biden, right?
We should have just
Well,
let them take Finland, dude. That's pretty unhinged.
Well, I mean, so what our options are, we provide free security services for every country in the world under the auspices of
It's not just
what,
free
just because we
security
don't think any
services.
country should.
We have an incentive to have these types of agreements specifically with countries in Europe, and I think that it should be extended around the world because it is the case that it helps protect peace and sovereignty, and we believe in that. It helps protect democracy and individual rights, along with the idea that it specifically is really important for our trade partners. Like again, we would have significantly less of an ability to be able to trade with Europe if it was constantly fighting at war with Russia, because that's what would happen. If we don't involve ourselves with NATO, if we don't involve ourselves with Europe, that puts small European countries at very high risk of being taken over by Russia. And Russia will do it. You know they will. Do you actually let's try to establish that first. Do you agree with me that if NATO didn't exist, that Russia would be in free for all against all these different European countries?
I mean, it would definitely depend on the country. I think Eastern Bloc countries certainly were at risk. I don't think Russia's going to take France, right? So it's going to
Sure.
depend on the individual.
Sure. I mean, but the point is also true that we want to keep France protected as well. Like the idea is that France in the past wasn't and was subject to the other powers such as Germany, and Germany did take over France.
Right, yeah, Germany took over France, but that's because they're right next door, right? I think geographic distance is one of the biggest factors for whether you're really in danger of being invaded by Russia. And then the second factor would be if you have nuclear weapons, right? So if you've got nukes, that's a pretty big deterrent.
But I think that NATO is a huge reason why these different countries aren't in conflict with one another and aren't in conflicts at all, right? Because it is the
Oh,
case
that's an
that
interesting point.
yeah, because it is the case that it's established that sovereignty and peace within the region. And that's also why I think that this should be extended around the world, right? Like, I believe that it's very important for peace and sovereignty.
Yeah, no, I mean, I actually really like your point that NATO is probably the reason why the members of NATO are not at war with one another. It's essentially the pact, right? It's just how we've continued the allies from World War II beyond. And that's why I'm not opposed to NATO. I just think that what's wrong with asking Europe to pay more of its fair share, right?
I actually don't disagree with you on that. I think that getting them to pay more is totally fine. But I don't think that, the threat of saying, you're not in it is, the way to do it. I think we can find other incentives for that. And also, building up their economies also allows them to have a greater ability to do that. If we're judging it based upon the percentage GDP that they're using, if they have a bigger economy because we've been able to allow them to build it up, that also increases how much they can put into things. So, it's not just a right now we evaluate it based on that. We can look at the future, and we do see heavy increase in how much they've been spending, especially under Biden too. It continued that trend up. So I don't disagree that they should be putting in more. I think it's really important for their sovereignty that they do put in more. But simultaneously, I have to acknowledge that, the reasons as to why we have NATO, right, is the same reason as to why, we're wanting to, defend Ukraine. If, say, Ukraine was a different country, it was France, would you try to defend France, or would you let France be taken over by like a country, given that it would take just as long to defend France as it would take to defend Ukraine.
I mean, I think it's a harsh answer, but I would have to look at a case by case basis and assess how many lives, how much money would it cost to defend France? What is the likelihood that the aggressor from France will be an aggressor to America? Like in World War II, I think it was very clear the thing we were defending France from was clearly going to be a threat to us. So that's a different situation than like a Russian incursion into Ukraine, where I don't foresee Russia attacking the United States. And if you do, then that's probably the source of our disagreement here.
But is Russia a threat to the United States at all?
I don't think Russia is a direct threat. I think they're a Cold War threat in the same extent that China might be, but like I don't think either of those countries are going to ever launch any sort of attacks on us.
But they will on countries that we have agreements with to defend, right?
What do you think Russia's goal is, just absolute domination of Europe, or do you think there's a logical place they might stop
Soviet
even
Union,
if we don't make them?
like Putin wants to bring back the Soviet Union, so as much as he possibly can take back from the Soviet Union, he will. NATO prevents him from doing that, though.
Right. So you think he would just like go all the way, push past Poland? He would go to East Germany.
I don't know if he would go to East Germany, but he'd probably establish pretty similar to like what existed prior to that point. But if he could, he probably would. You know, like I don't know. I don't know, but I do know he wants to build something that's similar to the USSR. Do I know what borders of the USSR he's trying to recreate? No, but I know it's not just like Russia. It is extending, you know? So like it does put like
Sure.
at risk, like, you know, our allies, people we care about, you know, trade relations, you know, international influence, soft power that the United States has. I mean, there's plenty of things that puts at risk. So, I mean, in the same way that we care about NATO, I think that's a pretty good reason for like Ukraine. But I mean, this point I feel like isn't much disputed by Trump. Even Trump upholds like that we need to defend Ukraine. He just did so through like a more lackluster way of defending them because he brought it back later. So I actually don't know if this argument would be like a reason as to why you could say you support Trump if you're going to be using this position.
Well, so I mean, you're right, because Trump is limited in what he can do in the Ukraine situation, right? Because the support for Ukraine is not entirely his choice since it's economic. Congress is going to have most of the control of that, anyways.
But he's also said that he wants that as well.
Right. I mean, I think, truthfully, I think he's traded some of it to get other policies, like in his other funding bills. But so let's focus on one that's more his
But
control,
before
right?
before
The
you actually,
Iran
here's one
strike.
thing. Maybe do you think he realized that he couldn't get a negotiation with Putin right now, and that's why he put the funding back?
That's very possible. I mean, he met with Putin in Alaska, and I mean, we don't know what happened in the room, but it's very possible it didn't go well.
Yeah, not just then, but like even prior. Like obviously it didn't go well then because he talked about how, you know, Putin and Xi Jinping were meeting up and conspiring against the U.S. So clearly it didn't go very well.
That's possible, but that would seem contradictory to the general narrative that like Russia really was like wanting Trump. They were banking for Trump. He's a Russian agent. Any of those claims is kind of undermined if like his negotiations with Putin aren't going well, right? I don't know how both of those could be true simultaneously.
No, no. The reason why that's true is because Putin gets more power. The negotiations are a smokescreen, so that he could get more power. That's what I think.
Oh, so like Trump is intentionally just flubbing them or just saying, hey, we're not
No,
reaching
Putin
peace
is.
and then just letting Putin do whatever?
No, Putin is. Putin is using it in order to con Trump. And I think he successfully conned Trump into believing that there's a possible deal on the line in order to get him to like essentially put his guard down.
Yeah, I mean, no, that's definitely very possible. I mean, look, while I do support Trump, I don't think he's some omnipotent genius, right? I mean, he's just a politician that I think is doing his best in the situation of foreign policy. And Vladimir Putin is likely more experienced. But again, I go back to lesser evil. There's no part of me thinks Kamala would be handling the situation particularly better. So I still end up skewing Trump support. Like if I have to pick who do I want negotiating with Vladimir Putin, I probably would still pick Donald Trump over Kamala for negotiating that.
Kamala, but there's not much of it. I mean, there's no difference in negotiations because it is the case that he's not going to negotiate until he's forced into that position and actually give up anything. He's only going to negotiate and concede to something if it inevitably gives him what he wants, right? Which we know what he wants is like a forceful dictator.
Well,
What?
yeah, that it's that or until he hits the Vietnam point where he's just forced to withdraw or make some sort of concession, right?
That's kind of what I thought was going to happen, given that we continued our funding. Like, if Harris were in office, we would have continued the funding. I think she would have been stronger against Putin.
So I
think
guess
she would
we're
have done
running into
amazing
this
in the
point where
negotiations.
what? Well, you said Putin wouldn't have negotiated. How would Kamala have done better in the negotiations with someone who won't negotiate?
Yeah, I said negotiations once they get down to the table, right? You were saying, like, the idea is that if there were negotiations, right, that Kamala Harris would be better than Trump in the context of there being negotiations. I don't think there would be negotiations as of right now, But I would think that there'd be negotiations within the next 4 years, given that we continued our funding up and we were, strong against Russia. That would bring down Putin into a position where he has to negotiate, right? That's what I was talking about earlier, where like he would be
Okay,
forced into like
sure.
conditions where he has to negotiate.
Do you think so? It sounds like we're kind of hitting on this point where Trump is more or less doing what you think Kamala would have done with regards to the funding, right?
He's doing lesser than what Kamala would have done, which
You
you
think she
might
would have
see as a
increased funding beyond?
yeah, like I mean, she would have continued it throughout the entire time. Trump got rid of it and then brought it back. So she would have never got rid of it in the first place, which would have bolstered us into a better position.
Okay. But Trump got rid of it for what, like 2 months?
It was like what? It was in July, so that was like near 5 months, 6 months or something like that. I'd
From
have to check back when he like originally
January
got rid of it.
okay.
I assume it was like right when he got in office when he got rid of the funding. I'm pretty sure it was like within like the first week or something. But yeah, like
Okay.
so. I mean, here's my points. Then I was like, it doesn't seem like Trump is so like amazing on foreign policy that he's reduced crime, or I mean, not crime, reduced wars that are happening around the world. It's not like we're getting anything unique from him. I don't think that we'd be able to point to any policy that uniquely would happen with him versus like wouldn't happen if Harris were in office. So that's why I don't think foreign policy, like especially with the disagreements that we have, would be able to provide you enough of a reason to like vote for one side over the other. And it seems like maybe like there'd
I
be other things that you'd bring up that would be doing a lot more of the, heavy lifting on the back end in terms of your
Well, I can
ideological
get to
beliefs.
those in a second, but part of it is Trump's first term was also one of the few terms of a U.S. president where we didn't engage in any new wars or conflicts. So I am giving him credit for his first term where we didn't go to new wars. And admittedly, his first term I think was better than his second in terms of like peace. Right, his work with Kim Jong Un in North Korea was pretty good. Like we've eliminated threats off the table in a peaceful manner. I was hoping for more of that second term. I mean, we're barely into his second term, so I'm not writing it off. But I want kind of more of that diplomacy. And having an American president that doesn't start a war is generally a rare find. So I kind of support that too.
What do you mean by we don't go into wars? If you mean like aiding and abetting in a war, I mean Trump did that under his administration with Saudi Arabia and Yemen, where they literally had a blockade around Yemen that starved 70,000 Yemeni children. So there were things that he was involved in that Biden dismantled and didn't want to be a part of. And then like also that there's a
Yeah, I'm
Turkish
not.
Kurdish war because he pulled out of Kurdistan with our Kurdish allies after they helped us fight
Yeah, I mean, I'm not counting aiding and abetting. I'm counting like new direct strikes of some sort. Otherwise, you would say that Biden was aiding and
Iran.
abetting in the Gaza conflict, and I doubt you would. I doubt you would consider Biden aider and abetter for the Gaza thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not pro-Israel. I'm pro-Palestine, so we can talk about that. And I have disagreements with both sides on that. But the point then would be that Trump then went into war then under that notion, right? And
Trump went to
with
war
Iran
where?
when he Iran.
Well, he did a single strike. So, okay, so that's actually one I do want to address. So, I think Trump's strike on Iran was probably the best outcome you could hope for from a U.S. president, given the situation, right? So, given that Iran was lobbing missiles into Tel Aviv and that the city was getting rained on with missiles, the fact that all Trump did was bomb a single facility where no one, then Iran retaliated and no one died has got to be the best outcome I've seen for that situation, right? I understand you're not pro-Israel. I'm actually not particularly pro-Israel either. But I mean, accepting that if Israel is being from Iran, a U.S. president must retaliate. I think I would challenge you to think of a better way to handle that, right?
I don't think a U.S. president must retaliate. I mean, I would disagree, especially if Harris did that as well. But I don't think this brings you like the idea that he's not going to go into wars based upon the definition of war that you're bringing up in terms of like each other. That does say that he is willing to even start those things, and that's also a byproduct of what he originally went against, like the nuclear agreement that we had with Iran. That would have prevented us from striking them, right?
I mean, the nuclear agreement that I don't think Iran was following, I think would have prevented us from striking them.
How were they not following it? They were determined under
Well,
Trump's
didn't
administration to. He even signed off on that they were following it under his first term.
Right, but okay, sorry, not the nuclear. So we couldn't have struck them over the nuclear thing, but and I understand the pretext for it was we can't let them have a. We clearly struck them because they were right. I mean, we can agree on that. That's clearly what happened.
Um, I actually like I'm not quite sure what would be more of an influencing factor as to why, but sure that could be some part of it. Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying is I don't think it would matter whether that Iran nuclear agreement was in place or not. We were going to strike Iran regardless of whether or not that agreement was in place because they were missiles into Tel
I
Aviv.
don't know. I don't know if Harris would have done that given that Israel started it. first, right?
So
So like
okay, I want to, and
I
your
just
chat's
don't
also
know if
pointing
that
out.
same thing would be true, but like I mean, I obviously like I wouldn't just like like I wouldn't deny that it's a possibility or that it likely could happen, especially because of like the pro-Israel position from Democrats too. So I mean, I just don't
Right.
see much of a distinction on this where it gets you much. Like what did
Well,
the Biden-Harris
so I want to.
administration do in terms of getting us involved in wars that Trump wouldn't have done?
Well, so wait, first let me respond to that. So I want to first agree with both you and your chat. I agree Israel started it, and so I'm not like taking a pro-Israel position in that situation. What I'm saying is because of our relationship with Israel, for better or for worse, whatever you think our relationship is, if they're getting attacked, even if they started a war, we will go to their aid. We've done that multiple times throughout their history. The question is, and we're going to do that whether it's a Dem or a Republican in office, we will go to their aid, right? That's not something either of us has to like, but it's sort of just a reality given the geopolitical situation. The reason why I think Trump handled it well is the way in which he went to their aid was a bloodless strike that ended immediately with no long-term like regime change war, which Nikki Haley and others were calling for, and ended pretty much as good as you could have hoped. That's why I think it was good. Not because I want to come to Israel's aid. I like again, neither you nor I are pro-Israel, but I want to I was sort of we have to live in the real world where no president that you could have voted for in 2024 was going to end the alliance we have with Israel. So I mean, you know what I mean? You kind of have to play the game as your cards are dealt with regards to that issue.
Sure. I mean, like I, I just you'd have to tell me specifically. Here's I guess where our point would be is that I think that we would get onto a disagreement. What would be distinct specifically on behalf of like with the Biden-Harris administration versus the Trump administration? Say that if the Trump administration were in office when the Biden-Harris administration was, that we would have been in less conflict or war than we were otherwise.
So I think under Harris, and like or under Biden, I think that we would have done far more in that strike with Iran. I think we would have taken out more military targets, or even potentially escalated to a regime change war. I don't think that's off the table.
I don't think you have any good basis for that. I think that's just kind of like you feel like it, not like it. You would have like any position on her, or like that she said that she would go into regime change. I mean, those things were floated under Trump as well, like the regime change and talking about all of those different things. So
Sure.
I don't really see you would have a basis in that position.
So I mean, it's a counterfactual, so it'd be very hard for me to get a basis on that. I would go off of just
Yeah,
Harris's statements. She is overwhelmingly pro-Israel, and Donald Trump is, for lack of a
as
better
well too.
word, somewhat duplicitous. So although he says he's pro-Israel, I think he's more duplicitous about it than Kamala Harris is.
Kamala, no, he says he's more pro-Israel than Kamala Harris. So
Sorry.
if anything, you would think that Donald Trump would do more in what's defensive Israel, especially given that he's like allowing them to do a one-state solution right now. He's allowing them to like literally take
Because
Gaza and the West Bank. I don't. Kamala Harris didn't say that she would support that. Kamala Harris said she supported a two-state solution.
I mean, I know she said she supported one, and I think Biden did too, but Biden was also allowing them to sort of have a one state thing. I don't know
Wait,
either
I don't know
president
if
would have.
Biden was allowing them to have a one-state, but like I mean, I think that Biden and the Harris administration allowed them to go way too far. I think that I believe that they were like helping them commit a I believe to that extent. But the point that I'm making is that I don't even think that they believed in a one state solution. There was no indication that they do. And Donald Trump has indicated that he's okay with them doing that. And I know that that's a pretty big distinction based upon what they've said versus the other side said. So I have a lot better reason to believe this about, the one state solution in terms of Trump versus Harris than you do, given that you have nothing that Harris said that would lead to like them doing regime change with Iran.
Right. I don't have anything Harris said. I guess, treating her as an extension of Biden, given that she was his vice president. I assume she would extend his policies. And Israel did
Even
all of
Biden.
this during Biden's presidency.
No,
Sorry?
no, but they didn't do a one state solution. They didn't announce a one state solution.
Well, they didn't announce it, but they began the invasion in what you just called of Gaza
Yeah.
during the Biden presidency with the full support of Joe Biden. So I am presuming that that Harris would extend Joe Biden's policy on that. I don't think that's an unreasonable. I don't need like a statement from her,
Yeah.
unless she speaks out against her own president. I'm
Wait, but
going to
what was
presume she
Biden's
will
policy?
follow her
So,
president.
I don't mean to cut you off. Just what was
Biden's
Biden's
policy.
policy? Yeah.
His policy was to provide weapons and support to Israel, irrespective of what they did.
I don't know if it was irrespective. He definitely didn't say irrespective of what they did. They definitely were in support of a two-state solution, right? So, and Harris definitely made that clear that she was in support of a two-state solution. So that's distinct from this, and we can base that on like what they've said, right? That we have better reason to believe that than we do to believe that anything about the regime change. Those were just like random claims. I think that you don't have a basis for at all, We have a way better basis for this because Biden and Harris have both said this.
Sure. I mean, at the end of the day, I think a lot of foreign policy ends up being speculative counterfactuals, where, I mean, I can't prove what would have happened if the other person was elected, right? But I can go off of what I've seen from them in the past and then speculate. But you're right, I'm
Mm-hmm.
being speculative. So, I mean, I'm not debating that, or I'm not disputing that point. I just think based on how Biden was, I assume Harris would be additional years of that. And Donald Trump is not 100% better, but I'm purely going off a lesser of the two evils analysis. I'm not like a MAGA cultist or anything. I'm just, I do think he's the better choice.
Well, I guess my point was that we haven't seen anything from the past to speculate that about regime change in terms of Harris and Biden. There wasn't anything about their policy that indicated that they would do that. So, especially anything indifferent from what Trump's was. And, that actually you do bring up a good point. Like, I do think that that's like actually kind of like a good reason why we shouldn't use foreign politics in typical to demonstrate like who we vote for, because it typically is based upon speculation, right? In this situation, we don't really have any indication of what they would have done otherwise. It's kind of like, for example, with Afghanistan, right? With the pullout of Afghanistan, what would the candidates done differently that would have led to less people there? A lot of people claim that there would have been less people that Donald Trump were in office. Well, we can't really point to anything Trump would have done differently that would have led to that happening. Then you can't really make a determination based upon that he's a better candidate, right? That seems like a very weak way to do so.
Yeah, but I agree with you that it is difficult, but at the same time, to not consider foreign policy when assessing what candidate's better is to leave out one of the most important jobs the president has. So we've got to do something on that.
That's not what I was saying. I wasn't saying to totally rule out foreign policy. I'm just saying it's not like a basis or a foundation for why you support one way or the other, but it could be very important in terms of the way you view things in general. And there could be certain things about foreign politics that you have enough reason to believe these things about. But like I'm saying, with the disagreements that we have, it seems like it gets boiled down to like just like a sort of like a speculative, like not really based in evidence position. And it's kind of just like we kind of feel differently on the matter. So I feel like that's not like a basis for why you would want to argue or debate why you support Trump. It seems like you might have better like luck trying to debate something else, because it really wouldn't get us anywhere to debate this, is kind of like my points.
Sure. I mean, yeah, we can move on to a different point then, because I do see your point. Although, because I just want, that is, war is probably my biggest issue. Then after that, I would have crime is probably my next highest issue.
This might be a more interesting conversation. Okay, so in terms of crime, why do you say that crime is a big issue, but then you're supporting a convicted criminal held civilly liable of who pardoned violent rioters who police officers on January 6th who were convicted of it and admitted to it themselves?
Right. So Donald Trump as a person is not like my friend or someone I like. I'm purely going off policy for this. And so multiple things. One, I would not consider the January 6 pardons to be a policy in the sense of like, policy issues, right? That's a one-time action for a very weird specific situation. I care more about like long-term policies, crime bills, and then also the general like culture that trickles down from the presidency to the state levels, since most crime is a state level issue, but the president does sort of set a cultural tone for that, right? Because they have the DOJ, the FBI, and they can affect a lot of things through like state grants. But yeah, I mean, like Donald Trump's personal life, I think he is an abhorrent human being as an individual. He's an adulterer. I mean, like all these, I mean, I am not going to defend Donald Trump as a person. It's just, who do I want as president, not who do I want watching my kids.
Yeah, but doesn't that set a cultural tone for like their society? Like if there's a convicted criminal being our president, doesn't that like set a cultural tone that we're more accepting of criminals? Or like the pardoning of violent rioters?
I mean,
you can say it's not a policy. I don't think that gets you around the idea that that's something that he did that would set the cultural tone of the nation to be more accepting of like violent crime, especially in the inciting of a violent insurrection.
Well, I think January 6th is an interesting case because it's not a standard violent crime. I mean, it's like violent in the sense that like Lexington and Concord were violent, right? They're not crime in the traditional sense of like, I'm going to go rob a bank. I mean, you said insurrection, right? That's when people are almost rebelling against the government to try to overthrow it. That moves beyond crime. That's more of like a political action, in the same way that like, you can say technically Martin Luther King committed several crimes, right? But the crimes were in relation to a civil rights movement. So you would be kind of insane to count that as a crime. Now, the January 6 people were doing things that were illegal, but they did have a legitimate civil rights basis. They believe the election was stolen. And you and I we can disagree with them over whether the election was stolen. But if you genuinely believe that an election was stolen and that you no longer live in a democracy, I do think that insurrection is a valid response. That's what our founding fathers did.
Yeah, but like if you believe that they have an illegitimate basis for believing the election is stolen, and then they like police officers and try to overturn the government, you'd believe that they don't have a right or just reason to do that. So, I mean, we would view these as crimes. Just because something's a political action doesn't mean it's not a crime. And also, like, again, were there violent crimes that Martin Luther King Jr. committed? And then, like, was pardoned by like, the president?
He wasn't pardoned, but he did commit violent crimes, but I don't think that undermines his message, right?
I mean, we're not making him president, though. What violent crime did he commit?
Domestic violence.
Okay. I mean, was he convicted of that?
I'm like 90% sure he was. At the very least, the police had a file on it, and they tried to use it against him.
Could you give me a source on that? Because I haven't seen this.
Yeah, I'd have to go check. Are you familiar with the letter Hoover sent to King to try to blackmail him into unaliving himself? Like, do you know about that?
I'm not as familiar now.
Okay, so essentially, whether they brought it to prosecution or not, Hoover got a bunch of like blackmail on King, and then tried to send him a letter to himself because he wanted to stop the civil rights movement, because that's a very J. Edgar Hoover sort of thing to do. But yeah, but I guess my whole point is I'm not attacking King. I'm saying individuals can have specific acts of violence, and it doesn't undermine their credibility on like other issues.
I think it does. I think it does undermine credibility. But like, I mean, there's no conviction I see.
So yeah, I'm saying it may not have been a conviction, but it may have been like he still did the crime, and then it was used against him in a more illegitimate way than if they had convicted him.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if we could find a conviction, maybe you could find a point there. But like, we're still talking about the president pardoning them. Like, so let's talk about it this way. So Donald Trump pardons violent rioters who police officers. That to me tells me he condones the violence, that he's okay with it happening. Okay. And he also told them to go fight like hell and to take back the country from those that stole it from him. And he himself believed the election was stolen with no basis in evidence. So that's him inciting a violent insurrection to me. I don't think you have plausible deniability because he did pardon the violence. I actually, prior to the point in which there was, prior to him pardoning the violent rioters, I actually didn't run this argument because I didn't think that there was good enough reason to establish that he like essentially wanted the violence, because he also said peacefully. I think that was contradicted by him pardoning the violent rioters.
Yeah, and I'm not denying that. I think my point is almost talking past you at this point, because what I'm saying is, yes, there was violence. Yes, he pardoned it. It's not crime in the traditional sense, because they're not just like doing random crime for self-benefit. It's crime in the technical sense, in the way that the like Revolutionary War was a crime, right? In the way that Lexington and Concord are technically crimes. They're peace officers, right? They're the lawful government of the time, but they're doing so in an insurrection-y sense. So I don't consider that relevant to a crime discussion.
But like, you think that they have a legitimate reason for that? If they don't have a legitimate reason, then that's wrong.
Well, I think they did have a legitimate reason. They believe the election was stolen and that they no longer live in a democracy.
That's not legitimate reason, because you agree that the election was not stolen.
I would consider myself agnostic on that issue. There's a lot of shady things, but I don't think it hits the burden of proof level where I would need it to be to say it was stolen. So I don't say it was stolen because I don't think the proof is there, but it's certainly shady, and I don't think they were out in left field on the situation. They
definitely were. That was proven by 60+ courts. I mean, many of them had Trump-appointed judges and Republican-appointed judges, so they were definitely off. They had no basis in evidence, no basis in reason, and also like the idea that like okay, so like if I claim the 2024 election was stolen, and then I like go in a police officer trying to take over the Capitol, would you not think that's bad or something? And like the Democrats pardoned me? Would you not think I did something bad? Would you not think that's disqualifying for those Democrats to have pardoned me?
Well, I mean, it would depend. Are you doing it just because you want an excuse to a police officer, or are you doing it because you're part of an actual political movement?
I actually wanted to take back. I actually wanted to overturn the government.
I mean, if you think you're just going to solo overturn the government, you're going to get arrested, and if you don't have any support back,
no. Let's say I had let's say liberals did the same thing on January 6th, but they wanted to overturn on this is January 6th, 2025. They do the same thing. Would you say that's justified? Would you say you could overlook that, or like that? Like if the Democrats pardoned that, it wouldn't be something to like bring up as a reason as to like why they incited a violent insurrection and under the Constitution are now not even able to run for president, given that we agree that they've done that?
I mean, honestly, I'm not hyper-partisan. If the Democrats had a good faith basis to think the election was stolen, and some of them went and did this right, I don't think that it's. I mean, I almost analogize that to the Black Lives Matter protests, where I think Obama and Biden do. I mean, yeah, because you're inciting riots and protests.
Did they pardon any of the violent rioters?
No, but if they had, I wouldn't have blamed them.
What? Oh, come on. I'm sorry. Like, if I was on live and they pardoned violent rioters, I would still be hearing about this today. I'd be hearing about this all the time. We would have never heard the
Well, I'm
end
sure
of
you
that.
would.
I promise you.
Of course you
There's
would, because MAGA people would never let you hear the end of it because they're not ideologically consistent half the time. But I genuinely do think there is something different between like I'm breaking into your store to steal money out of your cash register and I'm doing this action because I believe I'm making society better. Those are fundamentally categorically different things.
So to clarify, like if a presidential candidate incites a violent insurrection at the Capitol, you don't think that they should be disqualified for running for president?
No, and I really don't think it was incited. I mean, I think you're using
It
the word
definitely was.
incite based on retroactive. What? So what words at the time? So just fight like hell. Is that what
Fight
you're
like
basing
hell
the
and
incitement
take
off
back
of?
the country from those that stole it from you, alongside the pardoning of the violent rioters. Like he clearly wanted the violence.
Do you
They
think
told him
if
to
he
march there.
wasn't the president, so if he wasn't the president and he gave that speech, do you think he would be criminally liable for like incitement to violence? Because I would hold him to the same standard.
Regardless of whether or not he's president, I would hold him accountable for that. Because again, he then got into the position and then pardoned it. If say he wanted the violence, but he wasn't into a position to pardon it, I would still say that he incited a violent insurrection at the Capitol, right?
Okay, so
Because
and I'm going to ask
it's
you
just
this
the pardon
respectfully, but it's a very
demonstrates that he wanted it. Does that make sense?
so on the but that's retroactive. So you can't use something he did later to say whether it was incitement at the time. So you can
Wait,
you can use it as circumstantial evidence
I
of state
can.
of mind. I agree.
Wait, you might not say that this would be applicable in a court system, but from a reasonable standpoint, from person to person, I can retroactively say that that is a reason as to why he was okay with the violence. That's totally legitimate.
Sure,
That makes
but whether
sense to
it's
me. That makes so much
incitement or
sense to me.
not, okay.
You don't accept that reasoning?
No. Here's what I accept. I accept him pardoning it later is circumstantial evidence of his state of mind at the time that he was okay with it. But whether his actions are in fact incitement, I think is going to come down to what he does and says at the time. So let's just I guess I would discuss that with you and to ask you a Barry Parker like question. What is the legal standard for incitement?
Well, I don't. I'd have to look at the legal standard. I'm not qualifying mine based on the legal standard. That's my. I'm
Okay.
not. My argument isn't the legal standard because we haven't had like a criminal case where that's gone through.
Well,
My
we
standard's
had
not
a
the legal standard. I'm saying that like how I think the law should work. It would grant that this is a violent insurrection, an incitement of it, and the reason why I think it's incitement is because essentially the only condition we needed to be true, based on everything else I've already said, was that he wanted the violence to occur. That's the only distinction that I needed, right? Alongside the him saying fight like hell and to take back the country from those that stole it from him. And also took like literally hours to get the National Guard, right, to go there. Right? That was also like indicative of the, like that could increase the likelihood of, him wanting the violence, but it wasn't, concrete in saying that he incited it. The reason why I'm so
Okay.
concrete in saying that he incited it is because of the pardoning, because that demonstrates a state of mind that he was okay with the violence on that day.
Okay, setting aside the legal definition, when you use the word incite, like what is your definition of incite? Are you just saying he wanted the thing to happen? That's incitement, or
It would be him wanting it and him doing things specifically to incentivize them to go and do it. So like he told them to go fight like hell. He told them to take back the country from those that stole it from him. Told them the exact set of conditions of what to do, like what he wanted them to do, and then also wanted the violence on that day. So it was an uprising, and he wanted an uprising, and he also wanted the violence. So I think that state of mind demonstrates what he wanted, and then based upon the things that he said to them, he definitely then incited it under my eyes. Like he meet the set of criteria.
okay? And then you repeatedly refer to this like a police officer. How many police officers were that day
There were 150 officers with injuries.
with injuries?
Yes.
Can you provide me any source? Because that seems a little high. I know it's more than one, but 150 is a lot.
Yeah, I know it is. It is a lot. I would ask for a source too, so I don't mind. 150 police officers injured. Jan 6. According to the GAO.
And when we say injury, are we talking like these like very minor
so the
like
injuries. Or here, let me just clarify. Let me clarify. How I might be actually wrong. Maybe I misread this. Many police were injured on January 6th. 140, my bad.
Okay, and when we're talking injuries, are we talking like standard police officer injuries, like oh my hand hurt from punching someone? Because they do count that.
I'd have to look at the context. I have it on PolitiFact if you'd like. How many as a result of the Capitol riot is the title.
How many?
That's just the title.
Oh, okay. Is the number for that like two,
Wait,
right?
actually, they don't. Yeah, because I mean, we're talking about people who themselves after, and I don't know if it's two. I think it's more than that, but I'd have to check. Um, Here's a CBS News article. It talks about the 150. In total, more than 150 officers were injured in the attack. 86 officers reported injuries, the sources said, along with 65 members of the Metropolitan Police. It takes into account officers sustained injuries, and they did not, even more sustained injuries they didn't bother to report, including scratches, bruises, eyes burned from chemical spray. Yeah, like I don't see any reason to believe that it's just like people like punching themselves or something, like, or self-inflicted injuries. Maybe here I could look up how many police were injured based upon self-inflicted injuries.
Not, I mean, not necessarily self-inflicted. I just mean meaningful injuries as opposed to like I have a little scratch on my arm or something, right? From like wrestling someone to the ground. Because routinely what will, and I know I'm going to sound like a leftist for this, but routinely what will happen is when police officers tackle or aggressively arrest someone, they themselves will get injured during the arrest, and that will be charged toward the defendant who's being accused of like assaulting a police officer or resisting with violence. So I'm curious how much of that's going on here.
Sure, I'd have to
And I'm
look
sure
at the
they're gonna have
individual
that.
cases. That would take too much for me to be able to do that right now. In terms of being able to find that information, I can give you certain cases where Donald Trump pardoned people where you would disagree with what they did. Like, for example, DJ Rodriguez driving to the neck of a police officer. That's like him pardoning that is insane, right? That's
Yeah, no, and absolutely. I think actually almost all of Trump's pardons are insane. Didn't he like pardon Kodak, right? He's like he pardoned like random people for no reason to try to get political value, right? But again, pardons are like
that's
one-off
not
random
very like
things. I still care
anti-crime.
more about criminal policy.
Here,
Well, yeah, yeah,
like
but it's not. I
here, can I give us a point of agreement? I care about limiting crime in our
Sure.
country. I think that's a really important thing. So like I'm not like saying that like this is not important. I think that's an incredibly important thing. Um, but like I do think that the Trump administration is significantly worse for like limiting crime in terms of it occurring, especially crime that I care about. Because I'm not just talking about like
Other than
people jaywalking or like coming to the country undocumented when they haven't committed a violent crime or bad crime. I truly don't give a about that. I know other people do. Trump supporters think differently on that. I don't give a that. The type of crime that I care about is like what's the threat to people's safety and security.